Welcome to the Eschatology Podcast. This is Clifton, and I'm joined by Nick Wingate. Hello, Nick.
Good afternoon, or good morning, as the case may be, sir.
So, Nick is with Orca Design. They distribute Focal, Moscone, Illusion, Raven. Am I missing anything?
Gladen Audio, Black Hole 5. Yeah, I think that's enough for right now.
So, Nick, you are what? Technical instructor, director? What are you?
Well, I do product training, sales training, technical training, handle technical calls, clean the bathroom, whatever.
Yeah,
whatever needs to be done.
It's like when people ask me, what is it you do? And I'm like, well, part-time sales, part-time marketing, part-time business administration, part-time technical support, part-time hand holder, part-time shoulder to cry on.
Yeah, there we go. Same thing.
But
absolutely.
Anyway, so Nick's we actually interviewed Nick a couple years ago, and then technically things didn't come out on the recording, so I'm planning on interviewing Nick again in about a month in full, so you guys will hear more of his story. But Nick's been around for a long time. I remember when he was first on, you were on Team Pioneer at the same time Scott was, right?
Yeah, Scott and I were there at the exact same time.
Yeah, and
that was a lot of fun. That was a lot of fun. It was a high learning curve.
Yeah, you're
and
competing.
We'll let that go right there.
You were competing, I believe, with the Black Beetle when I first knew you. I think you had an Eclipse before that, right?
Yeah, I had a 4-door Mitsubishi Galant.
Okay.
Which was loaded to the hilt with all kinds of stuff. And then really did something crazy and stupid, which I will never do again, is go and build something like the Beetle. That was a once-in-a-lifetime thing. I learned a lot from building that car. I learned that it wasn't worth it.
Right. Yep.
To go through the hell we did with that car. It was a labor of love, though. Honestly, it was.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I think except for maybe guys like Scott and a few others who just, are insane and can't get the bug out of their system. I think everybody builds that one car once. And then, Mark Eldridge did a few times, but even then, he kind of hit his, peak with the NASCAR, and then that was it. That's good.
That was it. And I certainly understand Mark's feelings. Trust me. Yeah, it was like, you know what? It's time.
Right.
I don't need to prove another thing to anybody ever again.
Well, you say that, and then he turned around and won Aggieland a couple years with his fairly stock Chevy pickup truck. So
the whole story behind that, Clifton, really what it truly was, up until you and Chris decided that you were going to handle the logistics of the show. That was going to be Chris's last show,
right? And
I thought, well, seeing as this was going to be the very last one of these, I thought, all right, I'm going to put everything I've got into my stock location system and see what it did. And lo and behold, beat Steve Head. And, that's the only reason I did it. Honest to God, it was going to be Chris's last show. And then you go and upset the apple cart, and we're still doing this damn thing. So,
I know, right?
Hey, whatever.
Somebody's
but I'm glad you did. Well, no, I'm glad you did. I really am. I think it's important not only for the hobby and the sport, but I think it's also important for the industry.
I agree
that we have events like
this. It's great for the competitors. I think it's an awesome show. I've been there quite a few years in a row now, not as many as you have, but several years in a row now, and it's definitely, obviously I wouldn't be trying to carry on the tradition if I didn't see value in it. And I think, like you said, for the industry itself, it's something good. And Focal and Orca have always stood behind the event really well, and along with JL and Hybrid and a couple others, Kenwood. But it's one thing I love about this part of doing the events and everything is really just because it's something where the manufacturers are able to kind of throw down the gauntlet, but also put the gauntlet aside and sit down and be brothers, and it creates a lot of good camaraderie, in my opinion. So it brings out the beauty of car audio, not just pushing boxes. So
absolutely, I think that's above everything else. I've always thought it's just bringing everybody together to have a really good time, to learn as much as anybody wants to learn about, how things work in the car. And hey, somebody's going to win some money.
Right.
And that's the cool factor in this whole thing is, for me, it's bringing everybody that has a tremendous passion for the industry together.
Yep.
Maybe it's a hobbyist, an enthusiast, or a manufacturer, or a rep firm.
Yep.
We're all there. And, other than Knowledge Fest and maybe CES, we don't see each other all that often,
right,
until it gets to finals.
Yep.
And let's face it, you and I have a lot of friends that come to this show.
Yep. Absolutely.
And it gives us an opportunity to say hello and rekindle old friendships. And, hell, there are going to be 2 competitors at this show that I know of that have not been in the lanes in 20 years.
That's awesome.
They're coming back.
That's awesome.
Again.
Well, it's good because, last year we tried the $10,000 challenge to pull the old guys out of the woodwork, and the same guys who were there, the same old guys that were there before came again. So hopefully maybe we'll get there. But this year we're not doing that. We're going to focus on the $5,000 money round. I asked Emma and Mecca. It is tentatively a Mecca 4X show. It's just a matter of making sure we have the right judges there this weekend of the event, which is April 18 and 19. Also happens to, I don't know how we did this, but it's Parents Weekend at the university. So if you have not got your hotel rooms, make sure you do that right now, or get a tent or a cot or something. Sleep in your car, whatever. We'll have a kumbaya weekend in the parking lot.
Yeah, you'll have to stay in Austin or Houston.
Right. Yeah, because it will be nowhere close to College Station will you be able to stay. But, that'll add a new element to the weekend, and we will try better next time. We went for the same weekend, the weekend after Easter, and somehow Easter, I guess, was earlier this year, and we ended up landing on the Aggie Parents Weekend. So, but anyway, it will still promises to be a good time. If you have not registered your vehicle yet for the top 30, the $5,000 money round, you can do that at sqology.tech, TECH, sqology.tech. You can register there, or if you already pre-registered, you should have an invoice. You can just search for SQology. And we did the invoices this year because we have 3 major shows between this and the show at Hybrid, the Parkinson's Research Event, and then Steel Valley Regionals. So keeping track of 3 different top 30 events on top of everything else within that, that's hundreds of registrations and everybody to keep track of. And I know there's only one of you for you, but there's lots of you for us. So trying to keep track of all that, we've had to automate things as much as possible. And I know it seems cold and everything else, but quite frankly, I don't feel comfortable. I don't like talking to people about money. I'd rather talk to them about their systems and what they have planned and what's going on in their life. So that's why I try to keep that as on the other side as possible. But it's just part of making sure that, and I think everybody, Chris and myself and Larry Chishner and everybody involved, I mean, nobody's, for none of us is this our payday for none of us. Is this our revenue stream for any of us? Every cent and probably more that comes in goes back out toward the events and getting judges there and giving the best possible show, and experience for the competitors. So just wanted to cover that real quick. But the reason Nick is on the horn is because I believe he and James Feltenberger and John Skeeto put together the much anticipated track list for the Top 30 Money Round event for Aggieland. And he is here to run through that with us so that we can know how badly things are going to go. I mean, what to expect, because I know all these guys are really good at finding not the tracks that are necessarily the demo tracks that I would put in my car to make it sound the best, but that reveal the most about the different systems to be able to cut them apart. Because I mean, Nick, I don't know about you, but over the past few years, you can get a lot of cars now by finals time, and they all sound really good, and they're all really enjoyable. And I have a hard time just listening to people's demos tracks, and I love it because, again, it's the beauty of car audio. That's the good side of it. But when it comes down to being able to give constructive feedback from a judging position, because from a judging side, we're not here to tear apart the car or make the competitors feel bad, but we do want to be able to give constructive feedback on, first of all, to be able to objectively separate the vehicles on game day. This is each one of these events I would liken to, the Super Bowl or the World Series of car audio. So we're doing, putting the very best out there to be able to do it. And we don't want, anything to be by chance. It needs to be as objective and separated as possible. And I think that's what you guys have accomplished with this set of tracks for Aggieland. And you're going to have to pronounce some of these because I'm not really even sure how to pronounce a couple of these. But Toccata, I can pronounce Toccata. It's a Organ Symphony No. 5 by Mary Preston on Reference Recordings. If you want to start us off with that, and let us know what's going on here.
Yeah, this is, I think, myself, James, John, and some audiophile friends of mine here in Austin. We learned about this particular, not just this track, but this particular recording. I first heard it here in Austin at one of our reference theater stores. And I was absolutely blown away by the performance of Mary Preston playing the organ at the Meyerson in Dallas. And, we've used various different recordings from reference, in the past, recorded at the Meyerson. And, of course, it's one of the greatest venues in the United States when it comes to classical music, theater organ, pipe organ, choirs, you name it. It's one of the greatest venues in the country. The organ there is top 3 in the world. And she is, I think, possibly the best organist there is. And the reason we chose this is because this is one of the hardest pieces of music ever written for an organ. And when you listen to this, you understand that she is using every single rank on that organ. It's not just the upper frequencies or maybe just the mid-range section of the organ with an occasional bottom end structure coming in. No, throughout this entire recording, this entire piece, you hear her hands and her feet. It is nonstop. And that raises hell with crossover points and phasing.
Okay.
you have any phase issues whatsoever between tweeter, mid, bass, and sub, it is going to show up in this recording in spades.
Because of the close transition between the notes, or what? Why? What is it that's bringing it out?
Because of the close transition in the notes, so how fast that she is hitting every key on that organ. And the recording is, if your system is up to it, and this is the big one. If your system's up to it, you hear every stop, opening, and closing. If you understand how an organ works, this is not an electric organ. This is one of the organs based off of 250, 300-year-old technology,
right?
Where there is air being pushed through pipes. You literally can hear it on this recording. So your system has to be dialed in order for everything to be revealed on this recording. And we chose that one because, honestly, you could judge the whole dadgum score sheet on this one track if you wanted to.
Wow. That's saying something.
It is. This is not easy. I mean, the home systems that I have listened to with this, some of them just don't do it justice. They fail. Be it lower mid-range transition to the upper mid-range, doesn't work. Soundstage comes forward where it shouldn't be coming forward. I've had subwoofers collapse on the bottom side of the organ for the simple fact that she's playing 16 hertz, 20 hertz, 25 hertz, and 31 hertz all at one time.
Wow.
And I've seen, I won't name names, but there is various different manufacturers of subwoofers that it just sounds like a bloated and amalgamated mess. And you can't hear what's going on because sub can't handle it.
Gotcha.
So that's the reason this track was chosen.
Okay.
Okay.
Next one, I can still pronounce this, so I can keep going. Is the main theme from Battlestar Galactica on Telarc. I think there are probably 576.3 versions of the main theme in Battlestar Galactica out there. So we'll have to make sure you guys see the right one, and that's part of the reason we wanted to make sure we have this presented properly, so you guys aren't like practicing on the completely wrong song going into it. And obviously we can't just distribute the tracks out because that's illegal. So we'll do our best to get you. We'll do our best to get you the correct to know where to go for the correct version. But anyway, Nick, what was the reason behind this one?
When you first listen to this, and everybody please understand, if you want to buy this, look for it on Telarc's catalog. This is I don't think they've ever recorded another version of this. The first minute of this track is what everybody's going to want to listen to. Within the first 5 seconds, there is a 42-inch concert drum that when you listen to it, you should be able to hear the strike of the mallet, the report of the mallet, the release of the drum, and the impact of the reverberation of the drum.
Wow.
It's around 115 dB signal to noise ratio that we measured the other day. It's one of the most intense impacts of a musical instrument I've ever heard. And when you hear that, within just a few seconds after that, there's a series of trumpets that will come in that will literally take your tweeters apart and your upper mid-range apart if you don't have them dialed in. And I'm being really honest about it because, again, this particular track, I played it on some systems, and a couple of them we had to turn it down because, number one, the tweeters couldn't handle the upper frequencies of the horns and the harmonics. 2, the amplifiers started clipping all over the place with the trumpets. Yeah.
So dynamic range is the name of the game on this one.
Yes, sir. Dynamic range and timbre.
Okay.
If you do not have your subwoofers and your mid-bass drivers in phase correctly with each other, the bass drum will sound muddy and will lack impact. And if your phasing is not spot on, then that then that bass drum is going to drag to the back of the car, and you will suffer significant points in depth of stage.
Gotcha. Okay.
Because that bass drum is at the very back of the recording hall.
Understood. Okay. Anything else on that one?
No. Again, you could probably judge the whole system
Right.
From this one particular track. And this is going to be a common theme throughout this. We wanted this to where any one particular track, you literally could judge the whole car with.
Yeah, and it does seem like the judges, and just so everybody knows as well, this interview that we're doing right now is essentially going to be the layup work for the judges training as well. So, I mean, we're trying to be open about the information here to where the competitors have the same information as the judges, so everybody goes in on the same page. But we do,
Absolutely.
but with the judges, one thing that has always happened at Aggieland that's really cool is, we get together Friday night before the event at Chris's house, just the judges, and sit down in Chris's theater room where he's got speakers that are worth about the same as my house, and he's got quite the setup there. And it's, again, there's no single point of reference, obviously, but it's nice to be able to go through the tracks with the judges while we're all in the same room, and then we're able to experience these things that we're talking about as a group and discuss it and kind of know how we're going, the plan of attack for the next days, because it seems like each judge relatively speaking, it seems like most of the judges end up being on the same page, but it seems like, most of the judges find their favorite track of these, tracks that they really hone in on a certain part of the, each part of the score sheet. And that keeps us, again, the ability to stay consistent as much as possible. Obviously, and we're not going to go in the theory of scoring here right now, but obviously you're going to have differences of how each judge scores, puts a number down, just like you do in ice skating or anything else that where you're having to put a subjective number on something. But the most important part is that, the judge stays consistent to themselves, car to car. And, that's why we do it. That's why we do it in a small, 3 or 4 cars at a time in a certain order, that's consistent. All these things are done on purpose in order to maximize the consistency of the judge with themselves, in addition to among each other. But yeah, I mean, having these tracks laid out, like you said, where it's not just, this track is only good for, it's not a one-trick pony. These tracks are all meant to be comprehensive because of that factor. So just keep those things in mind. Anyway, I'll let you pronounce the next one, because I'll probably get it wrong.
Is this the Mussorgsky?
There you go.
Okay. This is Pictures at an Exhibition. It's one of the most popular, if not the most popular piece that Mussorgsky's ever done. And a lot of people know it simply because of what Emerson, Lake and Palmer did in the 1970s when they did a rock album based off of this one particular track.
Okay.
But the reason this was chosen is the recording itself. It is one of the most quiet recordings I've ever heard. A lot of times you can hear background hiss, tape hiss, noise. This one, when it is what I like to call black,
mm-hmm.
It is black. I mean, it is dead quiet between passages of instruments. The recording itself is fantastic, no question about it. And there's a ton of instruments throughout the entire range, including the organ that you have to listen for. And mainly this was chosen for timbre, bass, and also depth, width, height, and three-dimensionality. Because I'm going to be honest with you, James, myself, and two other judges at finals who shall remain nameless, we all said the same thing. 95% of the cars there sounded two-dimensional. There was no depth to them. They all imaged well, but there was nothing there to challenge any of those cars as far as the music was concerned. And I'm not going to get into the reasons behind that, but that's one of the reasons why we wanted to do this, because it was really difficult for those judges to come up with a score.
And you're talking about in terms of the layering of the depth and the three-dimensionality of the stage, correct?
Yeah.
You're not just left to right, but front to back as well.
No, it was front to back. It was, can you hear, for instance, can you hear the crash of a cymbal in proper relationship on the soundstage to where the conductor is? And we all know that 9 times out of 10, the crash of the cymbals is at the far left or the far right backhand side of a soundstage. And at finals, there were 3 or 4 cars that actually would do it. Everything else, it sounded like they were right next to the conductor, which is completely wrong. It's not to say the timbre wasn't correct. It was. It sounded fantastic. Layering, depth, three-dimensionality, surrounding instruments, that was not there. And there's a couple of more recordings on here that show this up in spades, but this is the one. This one does it fantastically well. It's really something. If you sit down and you listen to this system, listen to any system with this particular track, you should get a huge sense of space, not only between instruments, but also between where you're sitting and where the soundstage starts. It is huge. It is immense. If your car does not reproduce this in that type of terms, you're going to lose points in terms of depth and width and height.
Got it. What would you... Are there any tips that you would give to a competitor that is struggling with creating that sense of depth on how to get there?
Sure. The main thing everybody has to remember is your mid-range produces 85% of all the information we hear on any recording. Mm-hmm. If you have any resonances whatsoever in whatever your mid-range is attached to, whatever type of baffle, enclosure, whatever it is, if it vibrates, if it resonates, it is basically smearing the information. There's a phase shift taking place there. Prime example is this past weekend at Knowledge Fest. We had a car that's really good car. The car sounds really good. It had a Gladen Aerospace 3-way kit up front. And he's done well in Mecca on the West Coast, but he couldn't take it any further. And I got in the car and listened to it, and I knew what it was because I heard it. He had one of the metal enclosures that Gladen will sell you to mount the 3.5 in. Well, there was just a little bit of dynamite in it. So what we ended up doing is we applied about 3/4 pound of non-hardening modeling clay to each enclosure with a little piece of, Dacron type material in it to control the back wave, and all of his depth and width and height and three-dimensionality all of a sudden showed up.
Oh wow, okay.
That's something I learned building the Volkswagen.
Yeah, because you had quite a few speakers on the dash with a lot of things to resonate.
Yeah, and then we had 350 pounds of modeling clay in the dash.
Wow.
Yeah.
The things that people don't see in builds, right? That make the difference. Yeah.
And that was it, and so if there's anything I can give you anybody who competes or just wants your system to sound better, concentrate there first.
Okay.
And then the next thing is going to be your mid-bass drivers. If you've got them in your doors, it's the same thing.
Right.
They resonate, they smear, they cause a phase shift. Your sound stage will collapse. Everybody, and that's the one thing that, it's how I got my truck to do what it did. Is there's 150 pounds of deadening material in each door, and a 4-inch baffle that my mid-bass driver is attached to. It's what it took.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So stock on the outside, not so stock on the inside.
Yeah. Yeah. Basically, that's exactly right. But that's what the Mazorski is going to be used for.
Okay, got it. Chris Jones, God Moves on the Water.
Okay. This is a bass, and his voice are the two key elements to this track. His voice is so unique and distinct, and he has a very, very different way of delivering his musical interpretation of the music.
Okay.
Tremendous, and you're going to be left of center and right. If I remember correctly, are going to be key elements to this. So pay close attention. Within the first minute, when you're listening to this bass guitar being played, you should be able to hear the fingers on the bassist playing and plucking the strings. And you should be also hear the reverberation coming off of the bass.
Okay.
Okay. That is a big, big key to this one. Timbre. It's going to be lower bass, lower mid range, upper bass, and then the timbre of his voice. And if you've never heard this before and you're curious as to what it sounds like, go find a really good set of headphones. Okay.
Yep.
And by that, I mean not a $99 set of headphones. Go find somebody or go to a store.
Don't use your Apple. Don't use your Apple earbuds.
No, let's not do that. No. Yeah.
Do you have any suggestions on headphones?
Any of the Sennheisers, the Grados, the Focals, AKGs, any of those, those are really good companies. They spend a lot of money and a lot of research developing their headphone technology. Go listen to them. You'll get an idea real quick what we're talking about.
Right.
Because it's a near field environment, which car audio is. And when you put the headphones on, you really can pick out details that normally you may not hear in your car system. And again, it's going to come back to, did you do your homework? Did you take care of your resonances? Did you take care of your phasing between tweeters and mid bass and bass?
Right. Nothing should stick out, right? I mean, it should just blend.
Nothing should stick out. No, nothing should be over accentuated, or nothing should be turned down too much, as I like to say.
Right.
And you got to be really careful with this, because if you turn things down, let's just say you've got a bloat and that bass guitar at, let's say, 160 hertz, which is a common theme that a lot of people will boost 160 hertz and 120 hertz to give you impact on a bass drum or kick drum.
Right.
But when you listen to somebody play bass guitar and they're playing, lower E around the 50, 60 hertz range, you've got a harmonic around the 120, 160 hertz range that blooms and it gets nasty and sounds terrible.
Yep, absolutely.
So you've got to watch that transition right there. And that's the reason why we chose this, is that transition with the bass guitar and his voice. Got it.
Before we move away from the subject, since we've got you, and since you're kind of on the inside track with Focal, and without doing the sales tactic of saying the most expensive ones, which Focal headphones would you suggest, being that you have some experience there, I think?
Gosh, the Alere is, I think, a really good one. They're $1,500 a pair.
Okay.
I know that sounds like an inordinate amount of money for headphones, but when you consider what Utopia sell for, no.
Right.
There's a couple of, if you go on their website, there's a couple of headphones in the Pro Audio section that, if you're looking for something that is just really flat and it's going to reveal every doggone thing that's in the recording, they do a great job. I have a set of the Pros here at my house, and I use them to basically tune with when I'm worried about timbre. Yeah, once I get the car to sound like those headphones, then I know I'm 90% home.
And which ones were those?
They're the Professionals. They're in the, if you look under their hook, the last time I looked, hang on, let me look.
Focal Clear Professional Open Back Reference Studio.
Yes.
Okay, got it.
Studio.
Focal, it looks like Focal Clear Professional will get you there. It looks like they have red pads and headband.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. And I would also say,
they're not,
go ahead.
They're not uber expensive. The Sennheiser HD 650s,
yep,
which are still made, $400. You can find them on eBay. If you're looking for a pair of really good headphones that are comfortable, they're over the ear, they are amazing. I mean, I own a pair, and there's a lot of times at night I'm upstairs, and that's what I plug in when I'm up here upstairs listening to my system, and I don't want to disturb my wife. I'll plug those in and listen to them. And I'll sit here and listen to music or watch a movie.
And that's the HD 650s?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Absolutely. It's hard to beat for the money.
Yeah. And I would say, too, if anybody is, if that's still too much of a stretch, and I understand, even though it's easy to categorize and dump a bunch of money into the car, and then when it comes to headphones, it's like, man, I don't know, man. But anyway, the Audio-Technica M50X is, loved by some, hated by others, but it's $130 typically, and they're closed headphones, so you can kind of wear them anywhere and expect similar results. They do have their issues here and there. But actually that's what I use to record the podcast with, and I take them everywhere with me because they fold up to nothing for a set of over-the-ear, closed headphones. They're comfortable enough, and there's lots of options out there for them because a lot of people use them, especially in the studio. So if the question is, I know it gets easy to say, well, if I can't afford the $1,500 ones, then I'm not going to use any, and I suggest against that.
No, I do too.
I would rather use something that is objectively good versus something that is subjectively great. If it's the question between something or nothing. So yeah, I think that's That was, I think, when I came back to car audio in 2012, one was at the time I was using Bear Dynamic DT 880s, but I was using headphones, and then of course DSPs had come in the interim, and I could sit there with a $400 DSP and tune on a computer on my lap, and that was phenomenal. And between those two things, it was like, well, this is a game changer. I can make a good sounding car now. So
yeah.
Couldn't do this 20 years ago, but yeah, I mean, I think,
I think it's essential. I really do.
Yeah, I agree.
Now, especially when you look at this, as we're about to go through the rest of these selections, there's going to be a common theme that everybody's going to figure out. There is very, very little music going through an amplifier on the playback systems.
Got it.
There's no electric guitar. There's very few electric basses. Most of this is acoustical instruments and acoustical vocals.
Right.
Because it's the hardest freaking thing to reproduce.
Right. Yeah. Electronic stuff, again, sounds good, but it's not always the most revealing thing, unless you know it really, really well. But yeah, with acoustics, any of these judges it's why they're judges is because they should have experience with knowing what a real saxophone sounds like, and how, when it's pitchy, when it hurts the ears, when it doesn't, and how that is conveyed in a recording, because obviously we're reproducing sound. We're not recreating a live experience, but knowing how those instruments sound in a live environment is a game changer when it comes to knowing when to tame something back and when not to tame it back.
Precisely.
But anyway, we will move on to the next one. If I Could Sing Your Blues by Sarah Kay on Chesky.
This is an old standard. This has been around for a number of years. And I mean, Clifton knows this track really well.
It's not Spanish Harlem, but it's close.
No, it's not. No. That was suggested, and I threw something at somebody.
Good.
And said no.
I mean, it would have made Mark Eldridge happy, but that would be it.
Oh, God. Oh, yeah. I'm like, no, I'm sorry. I don't wish to go out and hang myself.
You would then. Anyway, let's continue.
Yeah, it's basically on this one again. This is another track where this is Sense of Space.
Okay.
You can hear the recording area in which she is in. Of course, she has a very, very distinct voice. It's almost to the point of being nasal.
Got it.
It's not quite, but it's almost. And if I've got to make sure about this, but I think by listening to it, if you know what you're listening for, you're going to know that the microphone that she is using is going through a tube mic preamp. You can hear it.
Got it. Okay.
And I know people are going to go, what in the hell is Nick talking about?
Okay.
And David Chesky, from everything I've read, David's a big fan of using tube preamps. There is a certain delivery of vocals to the tape that it gives, and it's very, very natural sounding. There's no distortion to it whatsoever. And if I remember, and now again, I might have to go back because I've listened to this track more times than I care to think.
Right.
And every time I've listened to it, I've always thought, yeah, that's going through a mic, that's going through a tube preamp. It's got to be. Her vocals are very full. They're very natural sounding to the point of being almost nasal.
Okay.
And if you take that, and I know there were competitors back in the day who used to take that out because they would think it was wrong. Listen to her on your headphones. Again, I'm going to say this. Listen to her on the headphones. You'll understand what I'm talking about, especially when she goes into her upper registers.
Okay.
You'll understand it real quickly. That's hard to do. That's hard to reproduce in a home system, much less a car system. And, it's those recordings are so lifelike and so revealing that sometimes people overreact to them and take things out. It's like the stand-up bass in Spanish Harlem. Oh, my God. How many times did I hear that bloated bass note and would think, what is wrong with my system? And I finally listened to it on a home system and realized, no, that's the way it is. Right. That's the way it was recorded. It's the way they interpreted it.
Well, and I think I think on Spanish Harlem, and I think I've said this before here, or we've talked about it, but the call out on that whole deal was that at one point Oh boy, and I'm going to remember. Was it Bob Katz who recorded that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think at one point Bob Katz had done a interview or an article with somebody talking about proper studio monitors. And
Yeah.
he said, this is, I think, kind of how Spanish Harlem got to be, the reference for everybody all of a sudden. But he had made a statement like, listen to this on your studio monitors, and all the first three bass notes should be, audible. They should be at the same level. And his point was that you should be able to hear the first one and two notes, because a lot of studio monitors, the guys using the little, Yamaha NS50s or whatever and stuff, they didn't play that low with authority to blend. So, his point was stop being purists so much, use a subwoofer or get bigger monitors or something so you can hear all the music that you're mastering. His point was not that all three of these notes are to be at, reference level to each other and be perfectly, so, and especially in a car, I mean, I think it's, and Mark Eldridge will correct me and tell me it's 68.2 hertz or something, but it's in that third note is in that 70, in that 70 hertz range somewhere, which also happens to be the length of most cars in terms of when the wavelength builds. Yeah. So it ends up being a resonant frequency anyway. And it's, it is perceivably louder no matter where you listen to it. And even if you put it on a computer and, analyze it, that third note is louder than the other ones. So if you try to pull that third note back, all of a sudden you don't have any punch in your mid bass and you're going, what happened? No. I made that sound good, but now everything else. So don't correct things for one song. It's the same thing. Don't change your system because of one judge. That's why we have all these judges at these shows, is so you can get a consensus among people. If you've got at any one of these, Aggieland or Hybrid or at Steel Valley, at any of these shows, you have the opportunity to have anywhere from 8 to a dozen plus judges through your car in a weekend, compete in everything you possibly can. And that's not because I'm saying that from an event director standpoint. I don't make any more or less money on this regardless of what you all do, but I would be using the opportunity to get as many people through the vehicle as possible, because even if I don't, it's human nature. We're going to listen to one guy more than another because we know their background, or because we know their background, if you know what I mean. But if I've got three or four different people out of a dozen that tell me the exact same thing, whether I agree with their political preference on Facebook or not, it's going to make me take note. You know what I mean? And then I can go, okay, here's where the trends are with this. This is where I stack up. And, getting the feedback of you're awesome and this is the best, this best car I've ever heard in my life. I think we all want that going in. I think that's what we have in our mind is going to happen every time we go in. It never does, but it shouldn't, because that doesn't help you grow. That doesn't make you better. That you don't learn anything by being the best. You don't learn anything from first place. I mean, it's nice. It's an affirmation that you did something right, but it takes time to get to that point. And sometimes you get there and sometimes you don't. And sometimes the best sounding thing you thought you had in the world, it didn't work out all that great. And then you brought I mean, it's like you, for example. I mean, how many times have you brought something thinking this is awesome and not come out the weekend as it planned?
Yeah.
And then you bring the truck forward, and I know you put a ton of effort in the truck and everything else, but you can't tell me that you were expecting to win the show that day. I mean, you know what I mean?
No, no, I knew where it was. I knew it was really, really good. I was really happy with it. I had, judged it myself. Of course, I'm biased in some respects, but that's just me. But I was, I thought, okay, this is, I knew it was really, really, really good. And I thought, you know what, if I'm in the top 5 with this, I'm going to be ecstatic. because that's really and truly, Clifton, that's what I was after. I was just trying to get into the top 5 with it. But to win, to beat Steve's Blazer,
right?
Yeah, that was just kind of like an affirmation of everything I've learned over the last 25 years. I put it into this, and it just affirmed everything that I knew I was right with. And yeah, you know, when you do something like that, it makes you feel really good, but it also means that, guess what? You have put the time and the effort and the energy into it.
Right.
And that's what it takes. And don't let anybody fool you who's listening to this, who is either competing or you're thinking about competing. This takes time. You're not going to go build something over the next 3 weeks or 4 weeks, bring it to College Station, and win. If you do, I want to hear it.
Right.
And I want to know who built the car.
Right. Well, the other side of it is that, you know, it's like anything in life. If you didn't put the elbow grease into it, if you just come out and win, which is cool, good for you. Here's your $1,500 or $3,000. Congratulations.
Yeah.
But you know, it's not that satisfying. You know, you're going to be left with an empty feeling afterward, because there's no risk and reward. There's no elbow grease in it. I mean, it's like for myself, I mean, I'll give my own example. You know, when I mentioned earlier in 2012, when I first came back, you know, I came back with a car that I bought from my dad that was my grandma's car for $1,000, a Dodge Neon, and I put a retail level $2,000 system in it, everything, speakers, head unit, amplifier, DSP, and a 10-inch sub in a Q-Logic box.
Yeah.
And
I remember that.
But it had about 200 pounds of sound editing the doors.
Yeah.
And, you know, same principles. And I came in and, you know, with Scott's and John Skeeto's and, you know, a few other people's help and input and, you know, some, you know, nights outside. But I had my 2-year-old at the time climbing on me while I built it in my driveway outside, you know, but I did it from the ground up. You know, it wasn't, I bought every piece of equipment that was in that car. You know, I installed every piece of equipment by myself. I chose every part of it. You know, I was the one touching the DSP at the end and everything else. And, you know, again, it wasn't on my own, but I had ownership of it. You know what I mean? I didn't, you know, it was my thing. And so then when I came into finals, and I wasn't expecting, you know, my expectations were low, but, and granted, it was also 2012 finals where I think in total we had like 36 cars there. So it was, you know, all the cars, like, you know, all the competitors compared to the 90 or so that we have now. So it was definitely a down year, but at the same time, you know, I walked in and, you know, did very, very well with the car, and I didn't win a championship with it, but I came within 1 point of the championship, and that was good enough for me. And you know, and then, you know, came back, I don't know, it was 4 years later, I guess, with you know, Scott's old G35, after, you know, Scott Welch had handled most of the build, you know, repainted the car. Beautiful, gorgeous build, you know, front to back, everything done the way it should be done. I mean, I had, you know, Randy Coonan had input on the car, and he did the kick panels and stuff in it. And then, you know, Scott Welch put a ton of effort into the car and everything else. And then, you know, hauled it out in an enclosed car hauler from California to Florida to Spring Break Nationals, and then, you know, won Spring Break Nationals with it, beating, you know, no offense to anybody, but I mean, I beat Brian Mitchell, and that felt good. Yeah. and you know, not good. And not in Pro-Am anymore. Now it's an expert, you know, and again, it wasn't just a hidden build. It wasn't a behind factory panel build. It was a, you know, it's a beautiful build. And I got a trophy, you know, and that's cool. And, I'm happy for everybody involved and everything else. But for me personally, that $1,000 piece of junk Dodge Neon with the, $2,000 retail system, that was the pinnacle of my career as a competitor, and,
I understand.
So, anybody out there, again, it's like the difference between getting a set of $130 headphones versus the $1,500 headphones. I'd rather you enjoy music today on the $130 headphones than not enjoy music because you can't afford the $1,500 headphones. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And same thing, don't think that things are going to get better tomorrow when you can do X, Y, Z. I mean, it's always good to grow and have something to build for and everything else, but enjoy what you have today, how you have it, and maximize that. And that's, in my opinion, where you'll get the beauty of car audio.
I know, and I could not agree with you more, sir. That's what this is all about. It's about enjoying the music, because that's truly what this is all about.
If you're not, then people enjoy technically geeking out and doing all that, and they enjoy the RTAs and their TIE Fighter microphone setups and everything else, and that's cool. But at the end of the day,
I'm going to borrow that. I'm going to use that.
Sit in the car, put on something you enjoy, that the background of the music, and that you can transport yourself into that moment wherever it is. I mean, Nick, I've always appreciated the fact that when you describe these things, that's why I love talking about music with you, and that's why we're here today. But it's when you describe something, I feel like I'm there. And I'm not hearing, you're not telling me, well, here's these 7 drum beats. They're equidistant across your soundstage from left to right, and the timbre needs to be equal. And if it's not, then you're a terrible person. When you describe these tracks, I haven't even sat down and listened to them yet with your description, and yet I feel like I'm there, and I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's what we're, as judges, that's what we were trained to do.
Right.
And I got to give credit where credit is due. This is James Feltenberger.
Yep.
James, when we were learning under him, the first thing he told us is, if you cannot tell your customer, and these are our customers, what they are about to hear or what they need to hear, and you're not telling them exactly what they're going to hear, then you don't know what the hell you're talking about, and your credibility is gone.
Mm-hmm.
Then you cannot be a judge in IASCA. Okay. So you had to learn, and that's the beauty of the judging staffs that are being put together for these shows, is we've been through this,
Right.
We know exactly what you, ladies and gentlemen, should be experiencing in your vehicles. We've all been there. Yep. God bless us. We've all been there. We've all had our asses handed to us in the past by either James or Richard Clark or David Devone, or Dale Fontenot ripping everybody a brand new asshole. Yeah, that was fun. Right. I can go on. We've all been there, and we know what you're going through. And the reason that, we have put this particular selection of music together is to be, as number one, as challenging as it can be, because, hey, let's face it, we want to separate the cars.
Yeah.
I don't want everybody, and this is going to sound terrible, but just please understand the reason I'm going to say this. There was very little separation at finals between first and 7th and 8th place in a lot of categories.
Right. Yeah. Single digit points in top 10. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going, no, that's crazy. And so in order to do that, you have to have not only really good judging staff, which they did at finals, but and again, don't take this the wrong way, but it was the music. And it's the way people were tuning for the music. And the reason this selection of music was put together is because you cannot tune for one piece of music or two or three pieces of music on this disc. If you do, something is, and somebody doesn't use that track to charge your car with, and they use something else, you are going to fail miserably.
Right. You can't
tune the car.
Yeah, you can't tune to the music. You have to tune to a general standard, not one song.
You can't. Get the car, and again, we're going to come back to the headphones. When it comes to, pitch, timbre, decay, I can go listen to your headphones if you don't have a home system, 2-channel home system. Listen to it. Does your car sound like that? Regardless of whose headphones you buy, I don't care. If you can make your system sound like a pair of HD 650s from Sennheiser, God bless you. You're going to score it out the wazoo.
And I'll add the disclaimer real quick for you here, because I know there are definitely the purists out there who are going to say you can't tune to headphones, and that's okay. We all have our different opinions, and I get that. I'm going to say better than nothing. If you Nick just said, I'm going to highlight and circle it. If you don't have a quality 2-channel open air system in your living room or in a studio or at a high-end audio place that you can go to and go hang out, a lot of those guys are bored because they're selling $35,000 sets of speakers, and it's not Walmart. People aren't walking in there all day. So I promise you, if you are in a city that has a high-end hi-fi place that has a room set up that probably costs 4 or 5 of my houses just in speaker wire, go there, say, here's these tracks I want to listen to on every system you have. Can I do that? They will do it. I promise you.
They're audio files. They're going to want to, what is this?
Right.
Oh, well, trust me, when they see these tracks, they're going to go, oh, yeah, you're pretty serious. Yeah, let's go in here and go listen to Mussorgsky.
Right.
Or let's go listen to Toccata, or let's go listen to, whatever. Trust me, they're going to want to listen to it. They'll be in there with you.
Yep.
And that's the reason they're there. They're fans.
Right. But
now,
again,
some of them can be stuck up. You know what?
It's okay. But yeah, if you don't have access to that, and many of us don't, and most of us end up tuning at 2 a.m, the night before the show, don't do that. Don't do that.
No.
But if you are that guy, at least have a pair of headphones that you understand the strengths and weaknesses of next to you, that you can at least have a reference, again, at least from 250 hertz up. Stage size, some imaging cues, front to back layering, like what Nick was talking about before, sub bass transition, obviously sub bass feel. If all headphones are not going to be able to give you the full scenario of that experience, and for some of that, you have to go, sit. Like what Nick was talking about, the pipe organ scenario in Dallas, some of these things you kind of need the live reference to at some point to actually know what we're reproducing. But and I could not agree with that more. About that's one of the reasons why anytime that we put one of these discs together, there is going to be a pipe organ on this. It is absolutely, positively, beyond a shadow of a doubt, the absolute hardest thing to reproduce in car audio is a pipe organ that plays from 150 hertz and down. Right. Yeah, just because of size. I mean, you're reproducing things that belong in a cathedral, not a 8-foot long car.
It's it. And when you can pull it off, it's amazing. Really true. If you can pull it off, and you've got a pipe organ that is sitting out on the hood of the car, and it's 35 hertz is out there, and the rest of the instruments are where they should be. Yeah, I've had, just honest to God, I've had 8 and 10-year-old kids get in the truck, and I will play stuff like, or piece of organ music that, of course, they've never heard anything like it in their life. And, of course, it's old man white music. Right. But they sit there and look at me and go, how is this happening? It's out there. It's not inside the car. That's right. It's not, because that's where it should be.
Right.
Oh, my God. I have a kid in my old neighborhood who was 8 years of age, and I played one of the organ tracks in my truck. And he was like, this sounds better than my daddy's home system. My daddy's car sounds like crap. I was like, oh, my gosh. But he knew. Now, this is an 8-year-old kid who didn't know anything from anything, but he knew that that was pretty cool, and my daddy's home system doesn't do this. Well, that means the car system's pretty incredible.
Yeah.
You know, somebody's done homework, and that's the reason why it's on there. But, you know, when you are at this level where we are, and especially when you've got this level of competitors who are going to be at this show, it's separating the really good cars from the outstanding cars.
Right.
And let's face it, everybody that comes to this show has a really good sounding system.
Right.
They do.
Yep, I agree.
You know, I haven't seen a score less than 175 or 180 points on the IASCA score sheet in 5 years, maybe 6. You know, and with our judging staff, 180 points is a doggone good score.
Right, right. Yeah. Again, there's, you know, it's not meant to be negative, but at the same time,
no.
You know, this isn't you're not going to get, you know, this isn't a participation sport. This isn't make you feel good with numbers. You know, you have God and your family to help you with, you know, whatever emotional support needs you might have. You know, this is to give feedback on your system, and you know, just being nice isn't the right thing to do here. You know, it's the judges are specifically picked these days because they can convey the information well. You know, it's one of those things where, again, it needs to remain objective between the competitor and the car. This isn't about you. You know, this isn't a what's ugly or beautiful. Right. It's meant to be
nothing personal. I promise you it's not.
It's meant to be an objective criteria and give proper feedback on evaluating the system at hand. You know, it's not, it's to give you the tools to make the system better. You know, and if the evaluation makes you feel good, that's a nice byproduct. It isn't necessarily meant to be, you know, the goal here. The feel good part of the competition and the events and everything comes in the camaraderie and working together and making it feel better. I mean, I have an example on that real quick, and then we'll go to the next one. But a friend of mine who I was talking to recently, I believe it was 2 or 3 years ago, when we were still doing the 2X events, and well, we were up till last year, and this year we're not doing the 2X events aside a 3X or 4X event anymore because it just creates too much confusion. But we had handed out results for the 2X event on Saturday, and this competitor didn't do well in relation to somebody else who was there, and he thought he should have, and he was not happy with the judge who had done that. So I went and grabbed the judge and brought him over, and I said, hey, here's XYZ, here's ABC. You all need to meet, sit in the car, judge, tell a competitor what you're hearing, you know, please.
Yeah.
And so the competitor that day involved was probably, you know, the least happy I've seen somebody at an event. But now maybe 2 years later or so, he mentioned that he is still using pieces of that conversation that happened because of that. When they sat in the vehicle and the judge, explained what he was hearing to him, he still is using that information today to tune his vehicles that are on a very high level now and sound really good. And he shouldn't have any issues when it comes to feedback. So, again, if some of those, perceived sufferings and negative events at the time, usually end up being our most valuable learning moments. And so if you're feeling frustrated or you're upset about the feedback you got, maybe, embrace that, tap into that feeling and find out why and get more information, because it could be the piece that's holding you back to get to the next level.
Yep.
All right. Cat Stevens, Wild World, half speed master recording. What does that mean?
There was a company known as Mobile Fidelity that was founded in the late 1970s that would take the master tape, and from that, what they would do is they would literally slow it down and capture all the information on the tape. Or as another example, they would also take the master lacquer and slow it down when they would re-record it. And they had a way of actually getting a higher resolution off of analog tape or a master lacquer. And their recordings have been the standard for acoustic rock or jazz for I don't know how many years. And when they first started doing compact discs, they discovered a way to actually bring that sound to a compact disc, and they were extremely expensive. I mean, this particular recording, this is a 24-karat gold-plated CD, and a lot of people would go, oh, who cares? Well, I can tell you personally, I mean, I have the original recording on vinyl. I have the original recording that was done on this compact disc. Then I have this. And when you get to this recording, this is amazing. What you hear in this, besides just the genius of this man, but when you hear him play guitar, you hear the pick in his finger being used on every individual string on his guitar. It is amazing.
Wow.
You can literally, if your car images like it should,
right,
you literally can watch his hand move up and down, not only on the fretboard, but on the body of the guitar. You literally can watch it move. It's an absolutely incredible recording. You hear the body of the guitar. You should hear the body of the guitar. Of course, Cat Stevens' voice is just unmistakable, but it's the upper mid-range transition to lower mid-range transition in that guitar when you're listening to the picks and the pick in his hand being played. If you cannot hear every individual string being strummed on that man's guitar, you better go look at your EQ, or you better start looking at your mid-range again.
Okay.
You've got a problem.
Okay.
Okay.
I think MFSL, right? Mobile Fidelity Sound Labs.
Yes, sir.
I think they, just for a bit of useless history, but I think they also did a pressing of one of the original 1987 Naka and Iasca discs.
Yes, they did. They did the very first Naka disc.
Yeah, so they've they've been around the block, and they're definitely well regarded for being the best in the business. I think they're out of business now, but for any of this kind of stuff, they were way ahead of the curve of everybody else.
Oh, they were substantially way ahead of the curve,
and probably still are.
Yeah, I mean, when you listen to these particular recordings, it's like you you've never heard this track sound like this, unless you have this particular CD. I've never heard it sound like this. I mean, again, I have the original on vinyl, and it doesn't sound like this.
Wow.
No, it's an amazing job what they did, and it's the reason it's on here, because it is so revealing in those particular areas. And again, if you have done something in your system to either hide or accentuate something, and you get to this, and you've done something in your mid range, this is going to sound like a toy guitar is being played. So be careful.
Let's back up a second and talk about reproduction levels. I think that's something that so between the organizations, and I'm going to include Emma in this because I have practical experience, at least overseas, with it. We'll see, how that carries over here. But, I'll start there because, with Emma, they're using, their one disc, which is recorded by one guy. So he handles the entire production process. So the levels are purposely maintained to a very high degree. So in that case, the competitor sets the listening level of the car for the judge.
Mm-hmm.
So the judge gets in and is basically not supposed to touch the volume knob unless it is noticeably, too loud to judge, in which case the judge will ask the competitor to turn it down. Or if it's too soft to judge, the judge will give the competitor the option to turn it up. From there, for linearity aspects of the score sheet are the only time that the judge is to touch the volume knob and then return it back to where it was. In Mecca, to the other extreme, I mean, I would say most of the time, the judges are, at least like when I judged at Euros last year, I would say typically the listening level was between, on average between 80 to 85 dB. Sometimes a little bit louder, but most of the really good cars were in the 80 to 85 dB range, and that was lower than what I'm accustomed to. And it seems difficult at first, but once you become accustomed to it, you really can pick out all the differences and details between the systems just as easily at 80 dB as you can at 90 or 100 dB.
Yes.
On the flip side, I would say is Mecca, and I will say I'm sorry now to the people who don't like it. When we originally wrote the rules and it never really got changed, I think maybe it's worth a look at some point. But when we originally made the rules, we made the specifications on listening levels, and that got up to 115 dB being written down in the rule book, and that's been there from the beginning, from 2001. Again, I apologize, but the reason, that's like one of the Mark Eldridge apologies, right? Yeah, it's my problem. Mark can raise his hand when it comes to Spanish Harlem. I'll raise my hand when it comes to 115 dB being written down in the Mecca rule book. The reason that was done then, for one, most of the competitors were more crossover. There was more crossover then, in the late 90s, early 2000s, between SPL and sound quality. So kind of being able to prove that, hey, we can get loud too, was kind of necessary to keep the draw, Another part of it was in separating vehicles. The intent, and it wasn't defined clearly enough in the beginning, but the intent was that, if these are all 75, let's say 70-point cars on the Mecca, of 100 points, if these are 70-point cars, and they're all doing great at 90 dB, that's cool. But if this car is getting in the 75-point range, and these two cars are getting really close in between each other, then the better car should be the one that gets louder and doesn't fall apart. That was the intent, was that really only 2 or 3 cars would ever be listened to at those levels. Kind of the problem now is that the average car now is objectively, and I'm sorry to everybody who disagrees with me on old school whatever Facebook group you're in, but the cars now on average are objectively better than they ever were then.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yes, there were the really, there were the Harry Chimera's and the the Mark Eldridge's and the Scott Pawaldas and the Nick Wingates, and we remember their names for a reason, because they had the really, the Chad Clodners, they had really good sounding cars, and those cars would probably perform just fine now as then, but those were not the average cars.
No, those were not the average cars.
Now the average car with, back then you were having to get very specific amplifiers and do very specific things to get the signal to noise ratio to the point to get the power, to use the right drivers, and everything else to get to the point where you could even play at those levels and maintain. Now, pretty much anything you buy from any reputable firm and then you properly install it will be able to do those things from an objective standpoint. From there, it's like you said, it's separating the very good from the outstanding. So I mean that was the intent behind having the levels be that much. Now, almost all the cars have to be listened to at that level by the rule book in order to separate them, because they're all at that level. Again, shout out to the R&E committee. I know you guys have a lot on your plate, and I know you guys do an awesome job, and I'm not involved in that, but sometime it might be worth taking a look at how we dial things back a little bit. In the middle is IASCA, which is objectively supposed to be in that 85 to 90 dB range, right, by the rule book.
Yes, sir.
Correct. And so the cars, like what you were talking about earlier, the cars that are dialed in for those few good songs at a certain level, for Mecca, for example, and might win every show they go to and do amazingly well, some of them fall apart in that 85 to 90 dB range. And if the competitor and the tuner and the judges are all listening at that higher level on certain songs, but then the IASCA judges are using the IASCA CD at the lower levels, things can fall apart. That can be the difference between you winning a world championship in Mecca and coming in whatever place you happen to come in IASCA. It's not because the judges don't like you. It's not because it's not because of what you posted on Facebook. I promise nobody cares. It's because there are differences there. So all that to say, what's your suggestion on levels when people are tuning these things, and to the judges who are using these songs for reference when they're playing them back in the competitors' vehicles?
Well, most of these recordings are going to hold up. Matter of fact, they'll all hold up at the 80 to 100 dB level.
Okay.
All right. Now, almost every single judge at this show will probably be somewhere between the 85 and 90 dB range.
Okay.
That's where they've all been trained. I know all of them. You do too.
Yep.
I don't know a single one of them, with the exception of maybe one who's going to ramp it up beyond 100 dB.
Okay.
Okay. Now, with that being said, I'm gonna make a statement about gain structure in your car. I know an awful lot of IASCA competitors I've judged their cars, and I get in the cars and I will ramp the volume up to 90% of full output on the head unit, and it may be 85 dB.
Right.
Now, your gain structure is not set correctly. I'm going to tell you that right now, because if that's the way you have your car set up and you show up to this show like that, you are going to lose points dramatically, because you do not have enough headroom energy built into the car in order for it to perform at the level it needs to be at for all of these songs, for all of these tracks.
Right.
Okay. With that being said, I'm going to make a suggestion.
Okay.
For those of you who are curious about how to do gain structure properly, if you do not have access to an oscilloscope, get one.
Yep.
Measure your output on your head unit or your source unit. If your source unit is a CD player and it has a preamp output on it, and you're using the preamp outputs, get a 0 dB track, and I guarantee you 40 hertz is what you need to play, and see where that head unit clips. And I don't have to explain what clipping is, do I?
No, I don't. I hope
ladies
not.
and gentlemen.
I mean,
that means if it squares off,
right.
It's not a pretty round curve on your oscilloscope. That's bad. Square is bad. Nice and pretty and round is good.
And there are plenty. And there are lots of you guys can use Google. I don't have to do this for you, I hope, but there are lots of economical ways to do this now that don't involve, you don't have the excuse, just like you don't have the excuse of that you can't afford the $1,500 headphones. I can't either, so that's two of us. But it's the same story here. There are a set of $130 headphones that at that point, if you can't afford this to do your best job going into this, then you should not be competing at this show. Just saying.
No.
Same thing here. There are economical ways to do this if you haven't had it done already, or your shop can't do it, or you don't have a buddy who can do it. Google it. There are economical ways to do this, and so not having a $1,500 shop oscilloscope is not your excuse. That's all I'm saying.
No, because there's handhelds out there that are like $100, and they're relatively easy to get your hands on. It's not that difficult to do.
Right.
And start with the head unit. Find the maximum output voltage that's clean. Leave it alone. Okay, and then go to your processor, and then do each individual output channel. Okay, and then do the output channels on the amplifiers. Step by, do a Google search or go on YouTube and take a look at, gain structure settings. Do your system like that. If you do, you're going to be fine. Then I don't care how loud or how soft the system plays back, you're going to have the dynamic range in order for your system to perform at its best.
Yeah,
which basically means it's not going to clip.
And here again, I mean, I know the people who are doing this shouldn't be asking how many watts their speaker is. You know what I mean? But unless you have a really anemic amplifier, or you're using your head unit as an amplifier, again here, not having 750 watts per channel is not your excuse. As long as you're using 75 watts ish, and again, the difference between 75 and 150 watts is mostly in the numbers between the two at listening levels. That should not make a ginormous difference for you. Obviously, if you get more power on it, great. Awesome. Headroom is a beautiful thing. Dynamic range is a beautiful thing. All those things are great. It doesn't solve all your problems. It just moves problems around. But again, because I don't have that, Moscone 0 point whatever, or that Zapco whatever, or that, insert brand name here, whatever. That's not your excuse for this.
Nobody cares. It is not an excuse.
Yeah.
No. Any good, reputable product with good, reputable speakers, it's going to work. It will be just fine. But it's setting your gain structure up. If you've never done it, I'm going to wholeheartedly recommend that you do that, because that's another reason why we have chosen all of these tracks. What we have is because we heard this situation at IASCA Finals again, and there were a number of vehicles there that did not have the proper dynamic range to reproduce what it should have been reproducing.
Got it.
They would just fall flat on their face. And this is also one of the reasons why there was an awful lot of cars that were two-dimensional, because their gain structures were not set up properly, and the signal-to-noise ratios were way down. They were very low, and it was like, okay, well, that sounds like Craco.
Yeah. You're not doing the products justice, much less yourself.
No, not at all. Why are you there?
Right. Yep.
So if you're coming to do well here, if you're coming to see where you are in relationship to everybody else that you're going up against at finals, and your goal is to get better for finals, then come on. Then you're going to find out
right
real quick where you need to be in relationship to everybody else at finals. That's for me. That's always the reason why when we went to a show like this. Again, I'm going to say back in the day,
right?
Yeah, it was good to win and do well, but no, the goal was always finals,
right?
Championship.
Yep.
Feedback. What do I need to do? How do I need to do it? Can I achieve it this way?
Yep.
And this event, the one that you guys are going to put on in Atlanta, the one Larry puts on at Steel Valley, these are key events with judges who have a tremendous amount of experience and people that have done this for years. Do not miss out on the opportunity to ask questions.
Not only that, but I mean, you're any one of these three events, and I know, it gets overwhelming sometimes, but any one of these three events, you have the opportunity of the equivalent of going to 10. It's like going to 10 or a dozen events all over the United States
one day.
In one weekend.
Yep.
You can, it's like when I started competing, I was living in Nashville at the time, and there was an event like every weekend. And that's awesome. And there's still, like Mecca has a ton of events in that area. But even though, there's only so many judges in a region. So even if you go to 14 events in a year, you might get 3 different judges that whole time. And sure. That's cool.
Yeah.
But you're going to end up, your system is going to end up being tuned to their feedback. So you might make that one judge really happy at finals, but then what happens with the other 4 or 5 that you might have? Whereas you're getting that finals experience and then some. I would say, and then some at any one of these 3 events. And if you do all 3, you should be able to roll into finals and cook. You referenced, like Steve Head earlier, and, a couple of years ago, he went through just won everything, and he's been doing this forever. And, when you say, I beat Steve Cook, that's not like a derogatory thing or not Steve Cook, Steve Head. That's not derogatory to Steve Head at all. It's the fact that, he's, that's like, hey, I pitched a really good ball, and Ken Griffey Jr., swung and missed. It's like,
right.
That's a proud moment because Steve Head is, so good and has so much of, he's the one who won the $10,000, all out money round last year. So, but again, he hadn't had as much success at finals until he went through these 3 events. And it's because he got that feedback from the judges. I mean, you can make yourself happy all day long, but this is about objectively making it better for everybody. And we all have our differences in how we hear things and what we focus on. I'm not even going to call it preference. I'm going to call it focus.
Precisely.
When you're using a score sheet, it is virtually, you do it yourself. Sit in your own car, score it 3 different times, and let me know how consistent you are. I'm betting that you throw yourself off more than you think, because depending on your mood, depending on what you're focusing on right then, depending on what the trend is for the vehicles, on what is working and what isn't, the judges are going to pick pick something they focus on and then build a score sheet around that. It's just natural. And so if you have the opinion of everybody, you really kind of, having 4, 5, 6 different judges on the same score sheet, putting that all together kind of gives you one solid score sheet. And so having that feedback from a multitude of sources, even if you come out starting out really, really terrible at the first show, by the time you get to finals, if you use the feedback and you evaluate it and you talk to the judges and get that information, by the time you come to finals, you had to have done something wrong, built a new system, or got a new car to not do well at finals. Stars and Stripes Forever reference recordings.
This is dynamic range.
Okay.
Again, this is a outstanding recording done by the folks at Reference Brass Instruments. This, if you've ever heard Stars and Stripes Forever play, which I'm sure everybody has,
right?
You know that John Philip Sousa, his band was primarily brass and woodwinds.
Okay.
And when you listen to Stars and Stripes on this particular recording, the amount of energy that is coming from this in the lower mid-range of what I like to call bass, which would be, let's say, 80 hertz to 400 hertz, is enormous. That's where all the brass instruments are getting their information, basically from those frequencies, be it the tubas, trombones, be it some of the saxophones, whether it's, I can go on, French horns, all of that energy is concentrated in there, all the way to about 2,000 hertz.
Okay.
So from, let's say, 80 hertz to 2K, you've got all this information going on. Okay?
Got it.
All right, so when you've got that kind of dynamic range and that number of instruments, and it's a large number of instruments playing, it's a large band. If your mid-bass driver is not up to it and you have not set your gain structures correctly, number one, your mid-bass driver is going to fall apart. Not physically, but it's not going to handle this well. That's number one. Number two, because of the dynamic range, your system clips, we're going to know it.
Got it.
If your system cannot reproduce this with the dynamic range that we're accustomed to, that everybody's going to be listening to this at Chris's house Friday night, they're going to understand this thing can ramp up in a hurry. And that means from low to high, from a very low passage to a very high passage. Yeah. It's extremely difficult, again, to reproduce in a car, because for me, my experience in tuning and in judging is the bass to mid-range transition. It is the absolute hardest thing to pull off in an automobile system. It's the hardest thing to do.
Yeah.
And if you get it right, your system is you're 90% there, because that means the mid-range and the mid-bass drivers are working together. Well, guess what? That's 95% of all the dadgum music.
Right.
And if you've got it right, then this particular track, your car's going to do extremely well with. But if it's not, if you haven't done your homework and you haven't dialed your system in, then you're going to have a serious problem with this.
Got it.
Okay.
All right. Coolsville, Ricky Lee Jones, another MFSO.
Okay. My personal opinion, this is the most demanding track on the whole disc.
Okay.
This is me personally. The piano. Within the first few 30 seconds of this track, you're going to hear the strike of a piano with a decay. The strike is really, it's you hear the felt on the keys striking the wood on the piano. When the person who's playing it hits that key, you can hear the felt. I know people are going, what? If you've ever been around somebody who's playing piano,
right,
you know exactly what I'm talking about. And again, if you're not familiar with it, this is get you. If you've got a really good 2-channel home system, sit down and listen to it. If you don't, get a set of headphones and listen to this, because this is really difficult to pull off. When you hear that, then there's a tremendous amount of decay that will start, and her voice comes in. But her voice is not front and center. Her voice is a little bit back within the sound stage. And her voice is extremely unique. If you've ever heard Ricky Lee Jones sing, her voice is very difficult to describe. She has a very unique set of vocals. It's extremely varying between very lower mid-range to upper mid-range into the lower high frequency range. I mean, she is one of the people that when she hits a note, she can sing to 10,000 hertz.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I mean, we put it on the Audio Precision and watched and looked at it and went, oh, geez, Louise, look at this. She has an incredible range. On this particular track, there is also a tremendous separation of instruments being used. You will be able to pick each individual one out.
Okay.
So this is also going to be left of center, center, right of center, depth, three-dimensionality. Again, you could judge the whole system on this one track. But this track is also very, very, very quiet.
Okay.
You should be able to hear everything on this track. Okay.
Got it.
Okay.
Bye Blackbird, Miles Davis and John Coltrane.
This is a recording that was done in early 1960s. It is a tremendous recording. This is Miles Davis and John Coltrane at their best, especially Miles Davis. He is playing a muted trumpet. And if you've ever heard somebody play muted trumpet, it has a very distinct sound.
Sure, yeah.
Miles is one of the people that likes to move while he plays. So listen to this on a home system. That trumpet moves. It is not standing still. It's not going to stand still. Don't. So if you think you're going to dial your system in by listening to this and try and get left to center or center, don't even try. Okay? Don't. It's not going to happen.
Got it.
This is, you hear the place where this was recorded. It's a live recording, and I believe it's in Paris, if I remember correctly. And you get a sense of space and a lot of ambience with this as well. And that was the key to this one, is listening to him play, understanding that that's the mute, listening to the air and the instruments and his power that Miles had, and the sense of space that you're going to get when you hear the reflections from the horn itself decaying across this recording venue.
Got it. Cool. I'm going to let you pronounce the next one. Adagio.
The Adagio. Okay. Yeah, let's just understand. This is a recording that is a number of this is a classical piece.
Okay.
It is an orchestra. This will tax your system's ability to reproduce at a low level. Okay, the low to high on this is tremendous. And when you listen to this track, you're going to notice that first thing, the width of your soundstage is enormous. If it is not outside your car's pillars, you're not going to score well. That's how big the soundstage is. It is huge. You have there's the layering and the depth of stage is, if you transition to instruments, it is very pronounced. And again, it's because of how good this recording is. It's very quiet. The levels in it are when there's almost nothing being played, it's black. But if you listen very carefully, you will hear people moving within the orchestra.
Wow. Okay.
Okay. That's a key to this one, because this is going to be left to center, center, right to look for the instruments, because it's real obvious. Okay.
Nice. Okay. Good Vibrations, Papa Do Run Run. I think this was Chris Pate's contribution, correct?
No.
No,
this is one that I've got a copy of it, and quite frankly, I forgot about it. I had a judge, a friend of mine, who is the head Ayahuasca judge in Japan. He recommended this.
Okay.
They use it in linearity, checking linearity in the car.
Oh.
And he is right. It's tremendous recording. You listen to the beginning of it, and you'll hear this big bass come in. And then you hear these great voices. And it's the voices of all the famous early rock and roll singers of the 50s and 60s. And they recorded this as a tribute to the Beach Boys. The key to this one is the drum to bass. The bass is not as prevalent in this as the drum kit is. Okay, the drum kit's going to be a little forward of the bass. It's how they recorded this thing. We do linearity with this track, okay, that's what I'm going to and that's kind of where we went with this. As you come up in linearity, if that bass comes forward, you have a serious problem. Because you should not.
As the level increases, you mean?
Correct. As the level increases, if that bass comes forward within the soundstage, you're going to get nailed. And I can tell you right now, this is the hardest thing to get right on this whole stupid disc. Oh my God. I had to go retune my freaking truck. And It pissed me off to no end. I do not mind telling you. I thought, I'm going to go listen to it. Well, that's wrong. And so I was listening to it on my home system, and I was like, wow, I have forgotten how good this really is. And then I got in the truck, and then it ended up in the back seat, and I went, well, that's wrong. Shit. So I had to go fix it, But watch, and this one's also left to center, right to center, right with vocals.
Okay. All right. From there, it's the imaging tracks, which everybody should be able to nail. So we don't need to repeat that. So
we don't need.
Unless you know of anything else, I think that covers the 2020 Aggieland track list. Yeah,
I think so. Unless we add some things to it, which is subject to happen, knowing you and Mr. Payton, myself, and James. But I don't think so.
If you get all these right, it shouldn't really matter if we add anything, if we were to, because
it wouldn't matter.
It's not gonna make a difference at that point. You got plenty of focus on here.
Yeah, if you tune your car and it gets 90% of this correct, leave it alone.
Right.
you're going to do extremely well. I don't care what show you go to. I don't care if it's Emma, if it's Mecca, if it's Ayahuasca. I don't care. It's going to perform well. It's going to score well. It's probably going to make you tap your toes and put a smile on your face, and that's what this is all about.
And I would, I'd mentioned here too, in this case, car audio is study and compromise, in my opinion. It's one of those things where if you can minimize the things that stand out, both good and bad, I think overall you're on the right track. It's when the cars that do something really good and then the competitor tries to accentuate that in addition to it, then it starts trying to impress the listener instead of reproduce audio. And if it's trying to impress me, it's taking a step backwards, not forward. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's exactly right.
If you can,
it's not doing what it should be doing.
If you can minimize the weaknesses, cool. Focus on blending the strengths. Like James says over and over again, and we just need to give him a stamp. Balance your system. Don't impress me. Just balance it.
That's it. It's balance your system to where nothing stands out, nothing's accentuated, but nothing's also taken away.
Right.
That's the key to this whole thing.
Yeah, it's a yin yang. It's a Zen study in Zen, and it's not easy to get to, obviously, because it takes time. But again, the more feedback you get from different people, you start hearing, if 3 different people give you similar feedback, again, that means something is standing out. It might be good, it might be bad, but it means it's standing out. So focus on working on the areas around it or on that thing itself to make it blend better, and your overall average is sure to increase.
Absolutely. No question. Couldn't have said it better.
Cool.
No question, sir.
Well, I will see here. There's the Mecca training at the end of February here, and then February 22 is the Mecca training. February 23 is Mecca Freeze Fest, which was also an SQology event. And then February 28 and 29 in your fair city of Austin, Texas, will be the Ayahuasca training event with Travis Chin, the new owner of Ayahuasca, after 20 years of Paul Papaday's owning.
Yeah.
And
I will.
Yeah.
I will be at that on Saturday. I won't be there till the following day. I know it starts on a Friday, I believe.
Yes.
I'm at, the work's got me somewhere on the East Coast, and I will be back here Saturday. So I will be available out there on Saturday because I understand if I've read some of the text messages I've gotten here lately, I'm going to be asked to do some of the training.
Okay. I will.
Just like, okay.
I was hoping / planning to be at the training. I will not be at the training because God, family, work tasks, and then this stuff comes in. Yep. My wife has a surgery on Thursday, and so I need to be here in the area for that. And so I am flying out Saturday. I don't know if I'll make it to the training or not, but I plan on catching up with you hopefully Saturday night. And then Sunday is the SQology event in Austin. And then I'll be touring Texas from there for work. But I will see everybody at one of those 2 events. Maybe both in some cases. I think a couple guys are coming from Texas to the Mecca Judges Training and Freeze Fest, and then so we're all kind of rolling together there. And then, like I said, Aggieland is April 18 and 19. Again, book your reservations now for that. And then we roll into the Parkinson's Research event, May 30 and 31. And then I think Steel Valley is July 25 and 26. I'll have to double check that. Anyway,
I believe that.
yeah.
Yeah.
We keep all, just go to facebook.com/SQology and hit the events tab, and all the events that are presently on the list are there. I believe the IASCA database crashed last week, so right now the events are not current, up to date on the IASCA website, but Travis is working to fix that. Everything should be on the Mecca events page here soon, and then the Emma stuff will show up. So I think that's it. Other than that, I will see you at the end of the month, sir.
Yes, sir.
And I appreciate
Absolutely
your time.
appreciate it. Oh, question before you go.
Yeah.
When are you going to post the list online? The track list.
I will. I'm going to, for everybody that's pre-registered, I will send them the list as soon as this posts, along with a link to this.
Okay. All right. Because you know who in Houston is bugging me about it.
Hi, Chad. We love you, Chad. Yep, he will have it. All right. Sounds good, sir. I appreciate it. You have a great day. And again, thanks for your time, and thanks for your detail on this. I thanks for all your help.
Not a problem, brother. Anytime.
All right, chat soon.
All right. Bye-bye.